Looks like it is noon. Um, if Barbara is ready, we can go ahead and get started. I just pressed the record button, so if you're comfortable, Barbara, you can take it away. Talk about herbs.
Is this the beginning?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say hello to everybody out there that I can't see. This is really a switch. Not seeing shining faces in front of me. And first, I'm going to apologize. Please disregard my raspy voice. The dirt that's been blowing around here has done a number on me. So, we're going to start talking about my favorite plants, herbs, because I like to cook and I like to eat. So, uh, first, before we get started, I'd like to take the opportunity to just read us out of a book called Fundamentals of Horticulture to sort of give us an idea of what herbs are. Herbs are flavoring agents and, like spices, are used in cooking to season, enrich, or otherwise alter the flavor and odor of certain foods to make them more pleasing. Different parts of the plants, such as the leaves, the fragrant seeds, the fruits, the buds, the bark, and the roots, have all been used for this purpose since ancient times. Most of the spices, black pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, and allspice, are derived from tropical plants. Savory herbs are aromatic plants, the various parts of which possess pleasing odors and taste, not to all people, but to most people. These plants grow in different parts of the world and have long been considered essential in food preparation, both in the home and in public eating places. Herbs are miscellaneous groups. Some are annuals, some are biennials, and other are perennials. Like a true biennial is parsley. It grows one year and then the second year it puts up a seed head and it finishes its life cycle. Some are grown for their leaves, some are for their flower parts, like the crocus is grown for saffron, and others for their seeds or roots, like echinacea for the roots. This is one of my favorite spots down in Antique Rose Emporium, and there are many herbs mixed in with that, and that's what I love that. This is what the colonial people thought had to be an herb garden, and that's just too much trouble for me. But it was beautiful to look at. And I was on a tour down there with Bill Welsh one time in this little house we toured. They made their attempt at a knot garden, and I thought, well, that was a lot simpler, but still, this is what I like, the natural herb garden where you just mix it up and put it in with everything and enjoy it. Now, the first one I want to talk about here is catnip. Uh, if you have a cat, you must get some. This is a mint, and sometimes I was afraid to plant it in the ground because mint can be very invasive, but let me assure you, my cats never let it grow. They would fight over it. Sometimes they made hot tea, but I think the main attribute is just for the cats. So if you've got cats, get you some catnip. You'll love it. And they will too. Now, lavender is one herb that I personally have had difficulty growing, although there are many master gardeners here who have grown it very successfully. Uh, the word lavender in flower language means devotion. Lavender has been grown in this area by a lot of people. I think two varieties, Hidecote and Munstead, have been successful for people. They're crafty. Lavenders would be excellent to use. Lavender has a long history. In the Bible, it was called spikenard, and before Passover, Mary used pure oil of nard to anoint Jesus' feet. The Egyptians used it in mummification process, and lavender was found in the pyramids. From the Egyptians, the Greeks learned about perfumes and aromatic herbs. Then the Romans learned from the Greeks and used lavender perfume themselves in their homes, and they also used it to treat ailments. During the Renaissance, they learned of its insect repellent properties when they discovered the plague was caused by lice on the rats. Today, it's a very good idea to have some lavender sachets in the drawers with your woolen or cashmere sweaters to avoid moth damage. I speak from experience there. Lavender can be used culinary for everything you would use rosemary for, especially cookies, cakes, and drinks. And you can make sugar with lavender like you can do with rosemary or lemon verbena by mixing some lavender blossoms, leaves with sugar and putting it in a food processor and just blowing it to pieces. Lavender is crafty mostly. People like to make stuff out of it. I have a bouquet of lavender grosso that I picked at a relative's lavender farm in Fredericksburg 10, 15 years ago, and it still looks great. Lavender likes our alkaline soil, but it must drain well because they do not like wet feet. They like full sun, but they might handle some West Texas shade in the afternoons. Lavender is a very popular plant, and there are many varieties. Fennel isn't easy to grow in the garden. People at first glance confuse it with dill because they do look similar. However, fennel is usually taller and darker, and the dry fennel seeds are gray and the dry dill seeds are brown. The base of the fennel is round with slightly overlapping leaves, and that bulb is very tasty, and raw in salads, use it for dips. Technically speaking, all parts of the plant are edible, but most people find the stalks too tough. The leaves can be chopped to flavor salads and dressings. The bulb is delicious raw or cooked. There are several varieties of fennel. Fennel was popular in the Mediterranean area, especially Italy, where they called it a slimming herb. We can all use that. They also looked at it to cure blindness and eye disorders. In Texas, fennel is planted either from seed or transplants, and as with most all other herbs, they want sun and well-drained soil. Fennel is host to the spicebush caterpillar, and you just need to plant enough for the kitchen and for the caterpillars. And if possible, do not plant dill and fennel too close together because they easily cross-pollinate. The flavors are corrupted and then it doesn't form a nice big bulb. Fennel is tasty with fish. Make fennel butter, salt and pepper on fish. It's really tasty with baked fish. And like I said, you can just slice those bulbs and put them raw in salads, or you can roast it, but I like it in salads or sliced thin to use with dips. The next one here is mint. It's one of the oldest recorded herbs. There were biblical references to paying taxes with mint leaves, and the old herbalists used it for treat many ailments. There are so many varieties of mint that the nomenclature becomes confusing. There are at least 25 main varieties and hundreds of hybrids, and some of them are a little iffy. There's peppermint mint, chocolate mint, and all grapefruit mint, and whether you actually smell that or not, it's up to your nose. One year at our plant sale, strawberry mint was the best-selling. In Mexico, they used it in cooking in soups, and mint is good in chilled cucumber soup or pea soup. Toss some leaves with peas or fruit salad, and it's an ingredient for a Middle Eastern salad called tabbouleh. And Google Barefoot Contessa's tabbouleh, and you'll find that recipe, and it's really good. Indians make riata by combining mint with cucumbers and yogurt. And the Vietnamese use fresh leaves of mint, cilantro, and basil for their spring rolls. Mint it can be invasive, so we're very careful. I don't usually plant it in the ground anymore because I still have some coming up here and there that I planted 45 years ago in a place that I really didn't want it. But if you have lots of room, go for it. A rosemary, this is a symbol of remembrance. And today rosemary is often found in floral arrangements for Christmas. I took this picture at the Antique Rose Emporium, but I will have to say that I have rosemary bigger than that now. And it came through just fine from our snow business that we had recently. I was afraid, but it's looking good, and it's got little blooms coming on it, so I guess it'll make it. The old herbalists recommended it for all infirmities of the head and brain, and they made garlands of rosemary as a remedy against forgetfulness, and I'm thinking maybe I'll do that pretty soon. Besides being a symbol of remembrance, rosemary was a token of fidelity, and fresh sprigs were used in bridal bouquets or to drape a funeral coffin. They said it soothes rheumatism, and I don't know, but I would take branches and put it under the hot running water for a bath, and it sure did feel good after an afternoon working in the yard. And I know my dog smelled good after she ran through the shrub chasing lizards. They say it will repel ticks and fleas. But the blossoms are just a magnet for bees and birds. Rosemary is a native to the Mediterranean, and it was spread through Northern Europe by the Romans, who used it as incense. So it's natural just to take this and use it when you're cooking out. You can toss it in a cavity of a chicken or in a cavity of a fish, use a basting brush, throw the stems on the coals, and it really is very good to cook with. Rosemary is best planted from seedlings. The seeds are pretty slow, and planted in full sun or could take a little partial shade, but not much. Is now joining. Once established, rosemary does not require much water. In fact, the one I planted in a 4-inch pot from one of our plant sales several years ago is in a place where after it got established, it never got anything except rain, and it's done beautifully. Rosemary is perfect seasoning for chicken, beef, wild game. Toss minced needles with potatoes to roast. It's good with tomatoes. But if you put the whole twigs in something like soup, be sure and take them out because they do not soften while they're cooking. These little beautiful blossoms are just magnets for the bees, butterflies, and even birds like them. Pretty little green leaves. I never even bother to save these. They're easy to dry. You just take a few branches and tie them and hang them upside down or nail somewhere, because I usually have it fresh all year round and I just go out and get what I want. This is another plant that I was used to going out and getting what I wanted all year round, but I'm worried that it's going to be down to the ground this year, and it was about 8 feet tall. We had one when we lived in Austin that was as tall as the carport, and I just love having bay because it's cardboard stuff you buy at the grocery store, just doesn't have the flavor. Sweet bay is a familiar laurel in Greek and Roman mythology, and they used crowns of it to decorate their war heroes, their athletes, their poets, and used it as part of weddings and funerals. The term baccalaureate came from earning laurels, meaning honor and praise. They used it for bee stings, wasp stings, poison for venomous creatures, and all against witchcraft and other evils. The herbalists in the old days just took advantage of everything that they had to take care of themselves. In the native Mediterranean area, it can grow 60 feet tall or more. Here, it needs a protected, warm, sunny area and often grown in a pot so you can move it in. Mine is in a raised bed on the south side of the house, right next to the brick wall, and is managed every year until this year. But the drippy ice on it was encased in ice, and when we had 222 plus hours of below freezing, it didn't like it. Hopefully it'll come out from the ground. Bay is routinely mixed with thyme, marjoram, and parsley to make a bouquet garni. And you use it to pickle everything from cucumbers to shrimp. And you can put it in soups and stews, but always remember to remove it before you serve because the leaves do not soften and they can injure your intestines. I like to drop a leaf into water when I steam vegetables or slip a leaf under the edge of a meatloaf. They have been put into containers of flours or grains to prevent weevils. Now I think we just stick them in the freezer for a couple of weeks to take care of that. Oil of bay has been used for skin diseases and bruises, and it made teas to treat sprains and joints. Try, if you can find a bay, try it, because you'll find it's a lot more flavorful than what you buy in a little jar at the grocery store. Thyme is one of the most used herbs that you don't think of as a dominant flavor like rosemary or oregano. It has a subtle flavor and often used in conjunction with other herbs. This thyme that I took the picture of here was called Miss Odina's, and I happened to meet Miss Odina one time at a plant conference, and this plant lasted in my garden for over 5 years before it finally gave up the ghost. So they will last for several years, but I like to kind of plant one every other year, so I've got one coming on. And I bought a pot at H-E-B and put it on my patio and went out and just harvested it during the winter and just harvested off of it while I was cooking. It was so handy. There are over 100 species of thyme, but the seeds are slow, so they're best planted from transplants. You remember, all of these herbs came from the dry, rocky hillsides of the Mediterranean, so they don't want to be pampered too much. Too much water can cause root rot, and too much fertilizer can result in lush but flavorless leaves. Lemon thyme is excellent tea and used for fish and poultry. And excuse me. But the stems are so tender, you really don't need to take all the little leaves off. Just use stems and all, but if the stems start getting woody, then cut them back to encourage new growth. This is an example. This was at a friend's house, and she had thyme growing in the pockets of the strawberry jar and chives growing out the top. And I don't know if you can tell, depending on what you're watching this on, but she had come in and she gave the chives a butch haircut. She wanted some. And that's not the way to do it, because if you do that, they won't grow from that cut and you'll have that brown little cut spot. So if you want to harvest chives, go to the ground and cut close to the ground, and that way it'll make it spread more and the plant will look better. This is onion chives, they have a little purple blossom that's edible. And these are, you can throw these in salads or just eat them. This is garlic chives, and these blossoms are edible also. The onion chives that we just looked at have a tubular stem, and these garlic chives have a flat leaf like lorope, and it's garlicky. I made pesto with it once, and let me tell you, it was strong, but it was good. And these plants, my mother called these society garlic. Then that's not correct. There is another plant called society garlic, but she did that because when they made seeds, they spread everywhere. So that's why she called it society garlic. You can cut the chives. You can cut them and to preserve or freeze. Cut them, mince them, put them in an ice cube tray with little plastic things, fill them with water, and then freeze them, and then pop them out into a plastic bag, and then you'll have a little cube of chives to throw in soup or something like that. They are also, like everything else, well-drained soil, not too much moisture. If they turn yellow, either in a part of the ground, that usually means a lack of nitrogen or too much water. Of course, we all put chives on baked potatoes, but you can use them on eggs, soup, salads, main dishes. You can make butter out of chives and mix it up with butter. And then you can put it on meats or anything that you just want to flavor up. It's a real popular and very tasty addition to your garden. I think they're pretty. Now, garlic. Garlic is affectionately called the stinking rose. And Gilroy, California is known as the garlic capital of the world since 1979. We passed through there on vacation once, and I got to taste garlic wine. Much to the disbelief of some of my friends, I did not ask for a second glass. Will Rogers once described Gilroy as the only town in America where you can marinate a steak by hanging it on the clothesline. And it was, I mean, the air coming in the vent of the car, we could smell garlic. Garlic was used by the Babylonians as early as 3000 BC, and then later it was recorded in China. During World War I, they soaked sphagnum moss with garlic juice to apply to soldiers' wounds. They also used it for a cure from everything from whooping cough, cold, sore throat, rheumatism, smallpox, restoring hair growth, and we all know that it wards off vampires. Garlic is a member of the lily family, is hardy throughout Texas. You can even plant the stuff you get at the grocery store, but you might find better varieties if you bought some at a nursery. I looked out in my garden the other day and I saw this green coming up, and I thought, oh, I planted those elephant garlic there about 3 years ago. So they decided to come up, and I can't wait. I love to roast several heads of garlic to keep on hand. And it's so simple. You just cut across the whole top of the garlic, put it on a square of foil, salt and pepper, and drizzle a little olive oil on the top. Then bring the edges of the foil up and fold to seal. You can set the pouches on a pan in the oven, bake for about an hour at 375, and then let them cool to touch. Then you can squeeze, when they're cool, squeeze the garlic out of each papery shell and store in a tightly sealed jar. I use mason jars for everything like that. I just say glass because it will permeate plastic. It's a little messy, but it's good to use in mashed potatoes or sauces or dressings. Or I've even known to spread it on a piece of toast like butter or a roll. Cooked or roasted garlic has a very mellow flavor, unlike raw garlic. And if you're afraid of garlic breath, just go out in the garden and grab a leaf of basil or parsley. But if everybody eats garlic, nobody notices. This is Greek oregano. To some extent, oregano is a flavor more than an individual plant. And there's Mexican oregano, which is not an oregano, but it still has the flavor of oregano. And also it has the landscape capabilities of having the pretty little flowers. I have in my courtyard, that's Mexican oregano, pretty blossoms. But in my courtyard in the front, I planted some hot and spicy oregano, and it covers the whole courtyard, and it smells so good. People always ask, can I walk on it? Well, yes, you can walk on it, and you can pick it. It was used an ancient herb. Egyptians used it as a sacred to the god Orsis, and they made crowns and wreaths. They used it for seasickness and a poison antidote. I tell you, those people back then were always afraid somebody was going to poison them because they made poison antidotes with so many things. But the plant's medicinal value is more than a fable. Studies show that oregano is highly antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, antifungal, and antiviral. Ethnobotanist Dr. James Duke said oregano contains at least 7 compounds that can lower blood pressure. You can harvest this all year round because it's there all year round, and it right now it's covered up with leaves from my oak trees, but it was not harmed by the cold either. So you can harvest anytime. You can save it if you want to, and the easiest way is to dry it. It's commonly known for pizzas or spaghetti, but used in a lot of Spanish or Mexican dishes. This is common culinary sage. And when we did programs for the kids, we would always take these leaves and we would tell the kids that it was like cat's tongue, and they remembered that because the cat's tongue is pebbled like that so it can lap up water. The name of sage, salvia, comes from the Latin meaning I am well. And during the days of the great herbalists, they used it to treat all ailments, and they thought it prolonged life. Before the introduction of tea from China, the English drank sage tea entirely, and the Chinese came to like it so well that they would trade 2 pounds of China tea for 1 pound of sage tea. Most of the sages are hardy perennials, and some can reach 2 or 3 feet. There are more than 500 species, but this is the eaten kind. They're common in gray, gold, and multicolored. It has an Arabic nickname of camel's tongue, which is the same as we suggested to the kids that it was like a cat's tongue. It's very drought tolerant, very sensitive to wet feet, and you can grow it in pots or in the ground. And we know that we associate sage with Thanksgiving, with dressing or stuffing, whatever you call it at your table. But it can be used with other fowl like chicken, goose, or duck. It's good with pork, especially good with good old Texas grown butter beans, and with green beans and stewed ham, stewed tomatoes. But be careful with sage. It can be bitter if it's overused. As with all herbs, 1 teaspoon dried is equivalent to 1 tablespoon fresh. The oils are so concentrated that it's much stronger. And if you want to do something with sage leaves, a little chopped fresh parsley will tone it down a little bit. You can add it to cream cheese or cottage cheese or melted butter to baste fish with. There's a lot of use for sage, the regular sage. This is a variety, Bergarten, but it's got the same pebbled little leaves. And pretty blossoms, and when they are blooming, the bees love it. This is my bush right now. It's bigger than that. I've had to cut it back, but it's getting ready to bloom, and it managed to come through the winter just fine. And the bees love it. So anything that I can draw more bees in, I'm happy with. Now, this is another one of my favorites. I mean, all of my herbs are my favorites, but I love salad burnet. I have better pictures of this I should put in here. This came through the freeze beautifully, never lost its color, it's beautiful. And it's an evergreen perennial, and it grows in this little mound, and it can reach 1 foot high or more, but mine are not quite like that. These little feather-like leaves that arch it. Well-drained soil, full sun, except in West Texas. I have this in a flower bed on the east side of my house that gets sun until about 3 or 4 o'clock. And I love the little blossoms. I read somewhere that the blossom heads are male at the bottom, bisexual in the middle, and female at the top. Well, who knew? It's native to the Mediterranean area and Western Asia, and it's become naturalized in parts of North America. Some people think it's invasive, but it is not like other plants that are invasive to me. So I just replant every couple of years to have some new plants would have a more delicate flavor. The young leaves have a slight cucumber taste, and you can use it in salads, soups, cheeses, and etc. to enhance waters. My favorite is to muddle it in a glass with icy cold gin and tonic. But it has also been used medicinally since ancient Greece. The great herbalists recommended it for a variety of ailments, and the revolutionary soldiers drank burnet tea. Look for it. If you can find it, buy some. You'll love it. Now, French tarragon is one of the oldest herbs, recorded hundreds of years BC. It has an anise flavor, but it's a little tricky to grow out here. I had one that lasted me, it would die back and come back in the spring for about 4 or 5 years, but I think it's gone now. But if you can't get French tarragon to grow, get Mexican mint marigold. It's not only has the bonus of the pretty yellow flowers in the fall, but the leaves have the same anise flavor as French tarragon. And it reseeds easily, and rootings will cut and water. One year, I had this out in that same east bed, and it died to the ground, and I was going to pull it up, but I just never got around to it. And I was so glad, because in the spring it just came right out from the roots, gangbusters, and so I just clipped off the dead and let it go. You might use caution when you use tarragon for the first time, because it is rather strong if you're not used to it. You can add a sprig or two when pickling beets, put it in carrots that have been sauteed, put it in cider. The blooms are edible and can be added to the salad or pasta dishes. Legend has it that a strong tea was made with the leaves used by the Aztecs to dull the senses of sacrificial victims. Well, I don't think that would help too much, but you'll like Mexican mint marigold. And I hear we might even have that in our plant sale. This is lamb's ear. And would you believe I'm talking about something that you don't eat? But it's got a good benefit. It's a garnish for your garden. And it's a low-growing evergreen or gray-green perennial. Cannot handle poorly drained soil and cause crown rot if you do. It is rumored that the ancient ones made tea out of the leaves. And in medieval times, the leaves were used to stop bleeding on cuts and as bandages by the Native Americans. But it makes a nice, and this is one that when we went to the grade school classes, we always took more than one, because the kids would rub them so much they'd rub holes in them. But they loved feeling the lamb's ear. And the blossoms are really neat for craft. They're delicate, but they're really neat for crafty projects. But this is also not a culinary herb. I didn't think of it as herb, but it's a garnish for your garden. This picture was taken out at the CAF garden when we were in charge of that garden, and look how pretty it is out there. This one is silver mound, and this one needs a lot of room because it goes big, but if you have room, it's really pretty. The sun shines through it, so pretty. But I had this one in the backyard. It's a ground cover, about 4 inches tall, and I liked it too. They're all varieties. They're easy to grow and drought tolerant. It's often called wormwood, and an old legend says that when the serpent left the Garden of Eden, wormwood sprang up to prevent its return. Some sprinkle dried or fresh clippings in the chicken coop to prevent lice, and it's used as a repellent for fleas and ticks. In Mexico, it's called estafette and used to treat stomach ailments. In The Drunken Botanist by Amy Stewart, wormwood is not recommended as a cocktail because the flavors are so harsh. But like many medicinal tonics, wormwood wine eventually became vermouth and is the main ingredient in absinthe, which is a pretty potent drink with twice the alcohol content as gin or vodka. So I think we just better stick to garnishing our garden and not drinking it. But while we're on this, Amy Stewart also wrote a book called Wicked Plants. She was a speaker at one of our Master Gardener conferences several years ago. And the Wicked Plants has a wonderful display at the Centennial Library in Midland, Wright-Bell. It will really be worth your while to go and see it, to see all of the plants that are poisonous that we don't think are, and the ones that we think are that aren't. This is curly leaf parsley. Parsley, without a doubt, is the most used and least eaten herb in the world. It's always a plate garnished and then scraped off. But wait, eat that parsley, y'all. It's like a vitamin pill, rich in vitamins A, C, and B. It's a good source of calcium, thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin, natural source of potassium and magnesium, and reportedly fights cancer. Another bonus that it deodorizes your breath, especially after eating garlic or onions. Parsley originated in the southeastern regions around the Mediterranean and has been cultivated since 3rd century BC. The Greeks, whose god Hercules made his garland of parsley, also made crowns of parsley for their athletic heroes. They took parsley and tossed it across the floors and tables of banquet halls to absorb intoxicating fumes of wine and to promote sobriety, but I can't promise that. There are 2 varieties of parsley. This curly, which makes a nice border plant, about 12 inches high. It's mostly used as a universal garnish. And the flat leaf, which is preferred for culinary use, grows taller with leaves that sort of look like celery leaves. And it reseeds in the garden. Mine parsley, flat leaf parsley reseeds prolifically. I have never had curly reseed in my garden, so that's all I can say about that. But I have parsley out there all the time, and it came right through the cold just fine. You can plant it anytime. You need at least morning sun. The seed is often slow to germinate, so I suggest just buying transplants in the early spring or fall and let them reseed. They're kind of like a 2-year-old. They want to do it themselves. Parsley is a true biennial. It grows leaves the first year and then blooms and reseeds the second year. Once you get it established, there'll be very little time that you won't have it. You can cut a bunch of it, put it in a glass of water like a bouquet of flowers, and it will last several days on the counter or in the fridge. Never do that with basil. Basil has to stay on the counter. It freezes well, so cut a bunch, wash it, dry it well in a salad spinner, and then freeze it in my preference a mason jar. Then you can just scoop it out with the spoon and it'll be all chopped up and ready to use. Always use fresh or frozen parsley at the end of cooking time because you want the flavor to not get cooked out. And don't mess with the dry stuff in the jar. There are many uses for parsley besides decorating a plate. You can use it.
Myers
You can
is now exiting.
Leaves can be used in almost any type vegetable dish. Chop and toss it with cooked new potatoes, put it in rice. A handful of it in a nice green salad adds freshness. And you can always add it to pesto made out of basil or arugula. And in addition to the leaves, almost any savory dish, you can use the chopped roots, which taste like a cross between parsnips and carrots. It's quite cold hardy, can harvest even when temperatures are around freezing. Dill is an annual in our garden. Reseeds freely to sprout in the cool winter, and I had dill that wintered right through the snow and the cold beautifully. It needs good, healthy soil with good drainage, full sun. It will cross-pollinate with fennel, which is occasionally bothered by the spice bush caterpillar. So you just need to plant enough for the kitchen and for you. Dill was used as a digestive aid by the Egyptians. Its name is derived from a Norse word meaning lull, which means it could quiet a colicky baby. Dill is also very rich in vitamins, minerals, vitamin C, and flavonoids. The seeds contain so much calcium that 1 tablespoon of seeds contains 100 milligrams, more than 1/3 a cup of milk. You can use the leaves for the dill. You can use the seeds for the dill. It's very tasty to have. Goes good with cucumbers, cheeses, egg dishes. Teas made with dill seed relieve indigestion. We immediately associate dill with pickles, but it's also good in sauerkraut, green beans, and carrots, or salmon croquettes, or any kind of fish dish. I clean the leaves, put them in a mason jar, and then just freeze them and scoop out what I need. If I have a big crop, I cut stems with green seeds and leaves and cram them into a big pickle jar or a 1/2 gallon mason jar and fill it with white distilled vinegar. and store it in a cool, dark place. After a while, the dill turns khaki colored, and it's great to use when making pickles when dill is not abundant in the garden when the cucumbers are ready. You can use some of the vinegar in pickles and also to make salad dressings. Epazote is hard to find, but if you can get it, you'll just probably have it forever. It's considered an annual, and when I have it growing, as soon as I see the seed heads forming, I try to cut them off, but it still manages to throw out little seeds. It's definitely an ethnic herb used in Mexican cooking and considered exotic. My favorite story about epazote is there was this Mexican food restaurant in Austin who was so proud of buying all of his herbs from an organic gardener. And he was telling the customer that he got the epazote for this dish from the organic gardener. And the guy says, "Come with me." And took him out to the parking lot, and there it was growing through the asphalt. So it's pretty hardy. The Spanish name epazote in the Aztec words mean animals with the smell of skunk. It's like cilantro. You either like it or you don't. And the Greek word goose and foot refers to the shape of the leaves. It's also considered a social herb because it's supposed to prevent gas when you cook for holies. I don't know, just that you never know how bad it could be. It's widely used in central and southern Mexico, and they flavor black beans, chicken and corn soups, and tamale pies. In the Southwest, it's used in green beans and seafood, mole or pipián seed, and cheese quesadillas. In the Oaxacan markets, they have bundles of it hanging from the rafters, and the women make tea of it to rid the body of intestinal parasites. So it's a one-size-fits-all herb. Now this is an herb that I grew. It's a fun herb to grow if you don't mind pampering it in the winter. It doesn't like cold, but it does well in warmer climates. I like saying it, Ojo Santa. It's a semi-woody plant that branches from the ground, has large velvety heart-shaped leaves with funny little white blossoms on it. In warmer climates, it can spread like bamboo, and it's naturalized on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. After pampering one in a big pot for several years, I decided to take it to my daughter in Houston. We planted it in a bed restricted by her pool deck, and later hoped the neighbor liked it because there's the little white things, because this is what happened. So it spreads. I think you had to get rid of it before now, so I can't tell you how it did in the hot weather. It's also called root beer plant because the leaves, you get the distinct root beer flavor, and is popular in Guatemalan and Mexican food. I used it once to wrap fish in the leaves, burrito style, and steamed it. And in Howard Garrett's Herbs for Texas, he suggests rolling up beef or chicken with peppers, onions, and garlic enchilada style, pouring a little wine over it and baking it for about an hour. Some Oaxacan recipes cook chicken layered with the tourm leaves and a mole sauce. It's a fun plant. It's not xeric, but it's a fun thing to experiment with if you have a chance and you like to fiddle around with stuff. Now I love cilantro. I've said this before about other things, but it's an acquired taste. People either like it or don't. The fresh leaves are called cilantro or Chinese parsley or fresh coriander. I don't know who named all these things. The seeds are called coriander. So if you find a recipe that calls for fresh coriander or Chinese parsley, you know it actually wants cilantro. It's one of the oldest seasonings known to man. In the Old Testament, coriander seed was compared to manna, and it has appeared off and on through the ages clear to now. And Mexico, it's like parsley, but they don't leave it on plate, they eat it. It's a cool weather plant you need to sow from September to February for crops. And it's got a strong aroma. First time we planted it, my husband had it. He said, "Who want to eat that?" But then we became addicted to it. And you won't believe this, but we tried to grow it because you could not find it in grocery stores here then. They just didn't have the vegetables that we do now. Dried is not an acceptable substitute. The unripe seeds are good with salads and grilled fish, and they are put in pastries and cobblers and breads. Cilantro is also an essential ingredient in Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, and Indian cuisine. My favorite trick last year was chop a handful and throw it into cabbage slaw, and it was different. And many years ago, I entered a Dallas Morning News recipe contest and won first place with a cilantro potato soup. That was way before cilantro was in favor, so it was really exciting. Well, we're wanting to use basil before frost, but it's be the first herb to go after frost, but it's still a little cool to plant basil out. It doesn't like cold at all. It was cultivated in Europe for 2,000 years, and there are at least 20 different varieties. They thought it was good, it was poisonous, or it was good for the heart, or used for bites of venomous beasts. The Greek and Roman physicians believed the only way to grow a good crop was to scatter the seeds while cursing and stomping your feet. Fortunately, it's not that hard, but we deprive our neighbors of the sideshow. The beautiful basil leaves make pesto. Our pesto oil can be made with the leaves and some of the stems at the end of the season. This is my favorite basil. Well, it's not my favorite basil, but it's one of them because it's a hybrid and you don't have to pinch the blossoms off because it does not set seed, but it's got the most beautiful blossoms and the bees love it, love it. So always plant African blue if you can find it anywhere. It's hard to find, but it's good to get. This one is big, has big leaves, Valentino basil. Best basil is just make a salad with fresh basil leaves and tomato slices and fresh mozzarella. And you know that when you have basil, you need to pick off the blossoms, but that doesn't mean just go ahead and pick those blossoms off. Go down the stem a ways too when they have little side shoots and cut back there, and that way it makes the plant branch out and become fuller, and then you've got something to take in the house to cook with. And arugula is another thing that I love in my garden, and it reseeds beautifully. Excuse me. It's got a strong peppery and nutty flavored leaf. A lot of people don't like it because it's peppery, and it comes mixed in a mixed green, but I like it just straight like lettuce in a salad. It's a native of Southern Europe, but it's also called rocket or roquette. And there are two different varieties of arugula, but traditionally they're the same. The flowers are edible and have a delightful raw peanut taste. And I always leave mine hanging on till the very bitter end when they bloom and blossom for the seed. Then I get the seeds, but I leave the blossoms because the bees love it so much. And one year I just cleaned up the raggy plant, saving about a pint or so of seeds, and we got a lovely 2-inch rain. In a week or so, my garden was like a green meadow. Talk about a thinning job. You can make pesto with the arugula instead of basil. This is rue. Rue has a bit of a split personality. Shakespeare hailed it as the herb of grace. In a few of his works, it's lauded for medicinal use. The Bible, however, refers to it as the herb of regret and associates it with sadness and bitterness, hence the term, "you shall rue this day." Today, it's still valued for medicinal properties and recognized as the national herb of Lithuania. It's traditionally given to couples on their wedding day to give them clarity in their marriage, which makes the whole grace versus regret issue a little bit intriguing. but also loves those caterpillars, love it. So get extra for them. And this is another herb that you can't eat, but roots of 3-year-old plants are harvested for the medicinal qualities of echinacea. Besides that, the butterflies love it, and so that's good to have something like that. There are 9 species of echinacea in North America, and combinations of several species are used to help stimulate the immune system and prevent colds and flus. Not so many are in America. They just allowed to carry therapeutic claims, but in Germany, more than 280 different echinacea products are registered and available. When it dies back after a freeze, just leave it because it has really pretty seed heads, and the winter birds love it. Calendula is a plant that you have to plant in the fall, and I should think it would do well by seed because it reseeds easily. I tried to get it for years at our plant sale and never had any luck, and so I found some at Christmas one time at a nursery in Tomball, and they do reseed. It's also called pot marigold. The young leaves can be used in salads or soups, but I have not done that. The flowers have a slightly sweet flavor to salads and soups. The petals can be pulled and dried to use as a substitute for saffron, which is very expensive. A yellow dye can be made by boiling the flowers. A strong infusion made from the petals has been shown to kill some bacteria and fungi, which gives some validation to the folk cures that have been given to calendula. Everything from burns, bruises, cuts to measles and chickenpox. All it needs is sun and well-drained soil. It will sure brighten up your winter garden. Borage is not a common herb, and I had a hard time finding one. Several years ago, I had a chance to order it for our plant sale, and I've enjoyed it. And I looked out the other day, and it's coming up. So the top was dead, but the roots are still fine. So here it comes. It's in that front bed facing east, so it gets some shade in the afternoon. The entire plant is supposed to have a flavor akin to cucumber, making it good for salads and soups. I'll have to admit I haven't eaten it because I just like it out there in the flower bed. The blue flowers are edible and used in salads and in ice cubes and sugared for decorations on a cake. If you want to utilize it, you want to do it while they are young because the plant matures, the leaves become prickly. To the ancient Greeks and Romans, borage was a potent medicinal herb, guaranteeing courage in battle, but the plants are now grown more for decorative value. Another plus, it's an excellent plant for attracting bees. Well, this is my flower bed on the south side of the house, and in that is lemon verbena, lemongrass, and garlic chives. That was taken a few years ago. It's changed since then, but those are all really neat blossom plants to grow. The lemon verbena can be used, like if you're making a pound cake, put the leaves in the bottom of the pan and pour the batter over it. Or you can take the leaves and put them in your processor with sugar and make lemon sugar to use in making cookies. The lemongrass is a tender perennial, and I'm thinking maybe one of mine made it and one didn't, but the one that didn't, I think, is the great big, so huge that I had a hard time getting bulbs off of it. The foliage is strongly lemon scented and can be utilized as well as the slender bulb close to the base. In fact, lemongrass is related to citronella and is supposed to repel mosquitoes, flies, and fleas. It's a staple in Southwest Asian cuisine and in South and Central America. Most years, it dies back. One year it didn't, but this year I think maybe it really did. When working with lemongrass, here's a fair warning. The blades can be rubbed upward, but never downward. They're like little saw blades. The harvested bulb's going to be stored in the freezer in a mason jar or a Ziploc bag with no loss to flavor. You can make tea, pour it, sweeten with honey, make soups. It's in Thai soups. They add lemongrass and coconut milk. Wonderful. Tom Yum Goong. It's special to fish with fish stock. And if you're going to use the mallets, the bulbs, hit them with a Berlin pin or a mallet to release the flavors before adding it to the stock. Use it to stuff in a chicken or a fish, or make a simple syrup with lemongrass to pour over fruit. And you should, it's really a fun herb to have. And if you see it somewhere, be sure and get some. When I first grew some years ago, my husband came in and he says, "You got Johnson grass out in that bed. I'm going to dig it out." Of course, he knew I'd scream and holler. Lemon verbena has a pretty leaf. So this is what happens when you want to help the bees. You just let things get raggy. And that doesn't bother me a bit because I see the benefit of the little bees, and they never bother me when I'm working in the garden. So I let things go to seed. Of course, then sometimes I have problems with too much coming up, especially if it rains. And for the bees, I always leave my arugula. Then the blossoms, they're just really tasty. Pinch one off and tastes like raw peanuts, but the bees love them. And you find interesting things in the garden that come up from the birds. Those chili patinas just came up next to those pretty plumbago, and the contrast is so pretty. You couldn't have done that if you tried. So my main lesson is have fun. This is my front flower bed, and one year I decided I dug out all the old shrubs and I planted Swiss chard and pinks and parsley and salad burnet and chives, and it was fun. So that's what I suggest everybody have fun with herbs and have fun eating with them too. And thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask now?
I do. I'm curious what, for somebody that's just beginning to get herbs together, what's about 5 that you would recommend that would be the easiest to grow?
Well, do you want to grow them in pots or in the ground?
Probably in a pot, yes.
Well, chives will grow well in a pot. Thyme will grow well in a pot. Rosemary will grow well in a pot, but it'll soon get big unless you've got a big pot. You don't want a little 4-inch pot. You need to have plenty of soil around the roots to be able to water them adequately, so you don't have to water them a lot because they don't want to be watered too much. What do you like to eat?
I have never cooked with them. I'm trying to learn.
Well, it's really easy, and I have a little saying. I usually put it in the program. I didn't. Try cooking with an herb. If you don't like it, all you have to do is not do it again.
Okay.
If it's too strong, do less. If it's not strong enough, do more. There's no written rule as far as I'm concerned about it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing it. There's an earlier one. I think someone was asking about if something grew in cool seasons, but I'm not sure what they were asking. If they're still on, maybe they can clarify. But everyone is just saying thank you. Oh, parsley. Does parsley grow in the cool seasons?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Parsley will grow all year. But especially, it wintered over through the snow just fine.
Everyone is just saying thank you. Great program. Thank you. Thank you. Someone is typing. Have you seen salad Burnett anywhere?
That's really hard to find.
Everyone is just saying thank you for the amazing presentation. Yeah.
Very
I'm
good.
going to stop recording.